you how much I appreciate it. And in some ways, it's really interesting. I put a timer, but I can talk about this topic for about 4 days. So I'm a timer, so I do not mess up your day. It's really exciting to be here, partly because the goals and the mission that I've been hearing about from about this year are very, very simpatico with the goals and the mission of our organization, the Texas Archive of the Moving Image. If I could start over again. Louder? Is that better? There you go. Actually, is that better? Okay. The goals and the mission of this organization are very, very simpatico with our goals as the Texas Archive of the Moving Image. We do call it TAMI. If I could do anything over again, I probably would have called it something different. At the time, I thought it was kind of whimsical that we could call it TAMI, but it's a mouthful. But our organization, you can see the site up here, is devoted to preserving and, well, actually finding in a lot of cases, but salvaging Texas's moving image heritage. When we think about historic preservation, we often have a tendency to think about buildings, right? Just like this gorgeous building here. That is very much what we often, as kind of Western society, looks at this. We think about papers, documents. We often don't think about more contemporary media, like 120 years of film, more contemporary than that, video. But the kind of sad part is that media artifacts are actually far more vulnerable, and there's quite a bit more urgency in terms of trying to rescue these materials before they disintegrate, and in some cases, rot. It is a real challenge, and you might wonder why that's the case. A lot of it has to do with plastic, right? Plastic. It has to do with the chemical decomposition, and in the case of video specifically, if you think about it, remember the videos that you had like, for VCR, VHS? Probably if you've got, can I play that back today? Probably would be pretty hard. And those tapes are disintegrating. So it's an interesting challenge that when I first came to Texas, my background was that I had worked at places like the Library of Congress in Washington, the National Archives, and also at studios like Warner Brothers or AMC, working on this particular topic. And when I arrived in Texas, I don't think I can be a member of the DAR, but I could count a daughter of the Texas Republic. I will claim that. That when I got there, I thought it was really interesting because Texas not only has an amazingly rich heritage, but it also has a great film history. The problem is most people pay attention to contemporary programs, right? They're going to pay attention to what is the latest program about Texas today, and not necessarily looking at over 100 years. In actual fact, one of the oldest films that exists in our country, in the case we have over 90% of films made in the United States before 1950 no longer exist. 90%. One of the few films that does exist is early footage of the Galveston hurricane. And that kind of inspired me. It's like, well, wait a second. Why don't we start thinking about how to rescue these materials before they disappear forever? So, about 15 years ago, I was able to convince the Office of the Governor's Texas Film Commission that we should create a program called the Texas Film Roundup. And we have literally crisscrossed the state with a Bring Out Your Films campaign. We have gone, where our goal is to get to every county. We haven't quite made it yet. But our goal is to do so. So all across the state, we have gone to talk to people, organizations, historical societies, museums, colleges, universities, about this important need. And we offer a free digitization program. And that is, we have the Texas Film Roundup has an event coming up in October that, again, is open to any individual or organization. So please take a look in your garages or your closets if you have any material there. But we offer free digitization in return for a copy that we can use on our website here for educational purposes. We don't necessarily use every film, but we try to at least use one from each writing Texas history. We know many of those kinds of really important, remember the Alamo, but we also want to think about home movies of people who have lived their lives doing all sorts of different work, important, valuable work, and tell a lot of different stories about the history of the state. And that's what our program does. So we offer the free digitization program. In return for a copy, we then return all the materials back to the community, the individuals in the organization, along with information on how to preserve your own materials, and also with the digital copies themselves, right? So you're going to have a lot of, I think, interesting, and I'll show you some examples of what we've been able to find, which has been exciting. In addition to the Texas Film Roundup program, we also do a couple of other things that I think hopefully you will find of interest. We also create online exhibitions. In a way, you can think of us as a kind of 21st century hybrid of a library, an archive, and a museum. So you can come to our site and see highly researched and curated exhibitions about various topics in our organization. Our latest one here is called Breaking News. I'm particularly proud of this exhibition because it focuses on a project that I have been working on for many years, and I'm very proud to say that Tammy is leading the national campaign about the need to preserve local news. I'll say again, if we think about local, 9% of films made before 1950 no longer exist, that statistic is just as bad for local news. And when we think about the demise of local news, which is a big issue right now that we're looking at, we want to think about also what has happened to local news collections along the way. If you wanted to try to think about how did Austin grapple with a particular topic in the 1950s, it's going to be pretty hard to find moving image materials related to those topics. So we are working very, very hard to raise the awareness about this particular issue and have been partnering with organizations across the state. This particular exhibit helps explain that particular project of ours and also has a bunch of crazy, wonderful clips in it as well. So we have these online exhibitions. They're open, they're free for anyone in the public, but also for our K-12 program. One of the things that was really, really important to me when we started this organization was when we think about a 21st century student, they are used to having moving images at every single, part of their lives. My son is rarely without some sort of a screen in front of his face. It drives me crazy, and I'm a media person. So one of the things we really wanted to think about is how could we use media in civics and social studies education. Speaking for myself, and I hope that you all share this, I have been really, really dismayed to see the educational system in our country move further and further away from teaching civics and social studies and taking this as a really important issue. I feel very passionately about this. So one of the things that we've been doing is working with providing lesson centers predicated, built upon the materials that we are finding across the state. So this is one of my examples that I love to use. If we are needing to teach about the Vietnam War, I teach at the University of Texas, and I have a lot of students that have never actually left Texas. It's really hard for them to envision Vietnam, Asia. So what I will do is I will say, okay, let's look at Marshall's collection. Marshall's collection, he was a Texan. He had never been out of Texas, and all of a sudden he is shipped to Vietnam. And while he was in Vietnam, in the Army, he filmed a movie. Here he is, all over Hanoi. Here he is, on the base. And we use this as a way to almost help them be able to kind of empathize and to begin to have that curiosity instead of just saying, here, learn about Vietnam, read about it. So it's a way that we're trying to personalize history in a way. So you'll see lesson things. So if anybody knows any teachers in K-12 here in Texas, please tell them about it. I had perhaps underestimated how tricky it is to get into K-12. I was a bit naive in terms of that, but we actually doing quite well. We do present the Texas Council for Social Studies every year, and are very pleased to work with the Texas Historical Commission on this project as well. So that gives you kind of a breadth of what we're doing, but it's very, very boring to have me just talk about it when clips are far more interesting to take a look at. So, what you see up here is, it's okay right now. So this here was shown at our 20th anniversary party, and so I wanted to bring it to you to share with you. These are our top 10 most watched films. We have thousands of films streaming online at texasarchive.org. These are our top 10 most viewed in the last 15 years. This particular film, I was trying to show you something really fast and it went away. Okay. This film is actually one of my very, very favorites. This is from Galveston's Pageant of Pulchritude, which was the precursor to the Miss Universe pageant, and was created as an attempt to get tourism back to Galveston after the desolation of Galveston in the hurricane. When we obtained, again, we don't keep this up, but when we worked with the Rosenberg Library in Galveston to digitize their collection, I looked at this film and I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's black and white, but it had a particular look to it. And fortunately, I happen to have been trained in this very strange field, and I said, that is actually color. It's not black and white, it's color. And we were able to write a grant in order to restore this film to its original color. So if you had just digitized it, it would have been black and white. But we were able to work with a laboratory in Washington, D.C. to bring the color back. We think this is one of the very first color films ever shot in Texas. I personally, as somebody who loves Hollywood movies, got very excited because if some of you know old movies, Hollywood movies, the gal that's wearing flowers in her hair is Dorothy Lamour. That's right. If you ever watched Bob Hope and Bing Crosby movies, there is an 18-year-old Dorothy Lamour. So I got very excited. I teach in the film department at UT and was just sharing this with everybody. Of course, the 18-year-olds were like, who? That was my most exciting moment. So this gives you an overview. So working with the Galveston Rosenberg Library, again, we partner with organizations, historical societies across the state. This is one of our most popular films. We have Selena footage that there was not very much footage of her before she was tragically killed. There's not very much footage of her. This is a very short PSA that she did for Mexican-American children, encouraging them to stay in school. So this is just a really short PSA, but it's really, really done well online. This is absurd. I'm going to...
Oh, nice.
I don't know if we have sound.
Oh, who needs it?
Well, good point. Good point. This is footage of Walker, Texas Rangers, shot here in Austin. They just were blowing things up, and it's a hilarious interview. You don't have to worry about sound. It's okay. Because basically all they're saying is, that was awesome. That was awesome. Right? But it's really fun when you think about the representation of Texans and how shows like Walker, Texas Rangers really play an interesting role in this, certainly globally. Now, this is from just a good home movie. Right? This is where some of you are thinking, why on earth would I bring this one of my home movies? This is why. We have amazing footage of San Antonio during the efforts to really restore the downtown Riverwalk. We actually did an event last spring. Last spring at the Hemisphere, which was so magical because we brought all of these films back. We had over 200 people bringing and talking about how they had worked to restore the Riverwalk, which was really exciting. This is an old educational film about wildcatting, right? The story of oil. Now, this is another example. Every Texas student has to study oil. They do not find this super interesting in seventh grade. I know because my son has told me. What we're trying to do is to use a lot of these old movies, old industrial films, educational films, to kind of create little snips here and there that can engage them. They can hear, and we don't have sound, but the gentleman that's narrating this is an old wildcatter, and his accent is so beautiful. It's so wonderful. It reminds me of my grandfather, and these are the kinds of films we're working with. Okay, so here's our local television. This is from KPRC, story of a hurricane, Hurricane Carla. It's not just today that they were shoving poor men and women out into hurricanes. It started a long time ago. And we do have quite a bit of interesting hurricane footage. Beulah, we have a lot of newsreels that were made kind of nationally alongside local TV. But it is interesting, this gets used a lot because children are also learning about weather. This is from an event many of us here in Austin are familiar with, sadly, the UT Tower shooting. This was pretty intense footage. This was a local television cameraman who, when he found out about this, ran down and was able to capture images. This also shows you another thing we do. We do partner with documentary filmmakers on national or international projects. In that particular film, Tower, some of you may have seen on Netflix, was nominated for an Academy Award because of the footage that we were able to provide. This is an absurd piece of footage, completely and utterly, but one of our most popular, which is the premiere of Batman, the movie in the 1960s, that occurred in the Paramount Theater, and all of the actors showed up in costume. And if you get a chance, it's really, really fun to see this particular interview. And then we have another example of how we are using older documentaries and older educational films in terms of Texas history and also American history. We have a lot of footage that we are using in U.S. civics and American history. This particular film is one of, if not the top most used on our site. And it is because it is being used in K-12 classrooms across the state. It is the story of the history of Texas. An important aspect of what we do is we do provide all of this free of charge, which for our schools is incredibly important because they often are faced with a lot of charges when you want to use a discovery program, for example, right? Now, this is one of my favorites. This was the #1 film most streamed on our site, and you're going to see, well, if you could hear it, it's actually in Arabic. One day we came to work, and it had taken down our website. Our website was down, and we were trying to figure out what had happened. This particular film had been passed around in, was it Afghanistan? No, it was in Pakistan, excuse me. It was in Pakistan. It had been passed around on like group chat, basically. And what it was, believe it or not, it was a bunch of Pakistani men who were very interested in the Pakistani airline that no longer exists. But when the president of Pakistan had come to visit LBJ in the 1960s, they filmed this particular film, and it featured a lot of this Pakistani airline. So it started getting, and this was around the time that the U.S. was going in after Osama bin Laden. So tensions between the U.S. and Pakistan were very, very high. And yet, here was a film being passed around, and the chat about it was fascinating. They were like, this was when Pakistan, we could be proud to be Pakistani. And then somebody would come in and be like, actually, I am proud. And then we would start fighting, and we're like, we're going to take this down for a while. Like, and one of the reasons I like to show this particular film is that while I talk a lot about Texas, I'll talk about the U.S. history, what's really exciting about this is we're also intersecting with a lot of the global community because of the internet. Anybody can access these materials. We do find every once in a while there'll be somebody in Greece, there'll be somebody in Australia that are actually looking and using this footage, and we communicate with people around the world. So, in essence, I think that the top 10 gives a kind of nice overview as to the kinds of collections that we have We have, yes. It's interesting you bring that up. We had gone out there, I think maybe 2 times, hoping to partner with them because they actually have quite a big and fantastic archive out there. Oh, wow. It's amazing. If you all haven't had a chance to go to the collections, the special collections of Texas Tech, it's spectacular. We kind of wanted to move in. They were not interested enough moving in, but we were trying to make that happen. They are doing amazing work out there, and it's one of the best. We worked, and we did license the material to the Ken Burns Vietnam documentary, but they worked very closely with Texas Tech on that. So another really interesting part of what is happening certainly is that, the National Archives and Library of Congress are overwhelmed as federal repositories. And one of the things that many of us are doing on the national level is, can we just share the wealth? Why does everything have to be kind of in these locations? And we always say lots of copies keep stuff safe. If you're out of Galveston, we digitized some materials from Corpus Christi, and we educated families like these aren't in really great shape, but here's copies, here's a digital copy, we kept a copy. And then one of the hurricanes came through and they contacted us and they said, we've lost everything. Do you happen to still have a copy of our film? And we said, we do. Which was really exciting. And so again, I know it sounds really kind of silly. This is my archivist hat on, but lots of copies does keep us safe. So if you have it in DC and Lubbock and Seattle and Iowa, that's always a good thing. Yeah.
I'm going to show my interest here. How do you archive your stuff? How do you keep your stuff safe? Is it a big cloud up there, or?
That's a great question. So I literally started this in my apartment on 18th Street, not far from there. And when we started, we were literally backing up the digital files on external hard drives. We were just literally, I would put them on several hard drives in different locations. Now we have a massive server, and we are also backing up to the cloud. Again, our mantra with this is really copies and copies and copies. We do have, even though when I started this organization, the idea was to not take on a lot of physical materials, to again, put the physical materials back in the communities from whence they came. Same way with the things. I feel very strongly that those materials should go back to communities where they have more resonance. However, I now have many storage units full of material that was going to be junked. And I'll give you a good example of this. When we first started our free digitization program, I got a call from the Texas Department of Public Safety, and it was this almost to be retired cop who goes, "Hey, I'm calling. Do you know where I can recycle film?" And I was like, "Hold on, what?" He said, "Where can I recycle film?" And I said, what's the goal here? Because all of the films that we have at the Texas Department of Public Safety Museum here in Austin, that's right, we're getting ready to throw them out. And I thought maybe there's a way to recycle them. So I said, stop. I rented a pickup truck. I rented a pickup truck at U-Haul. And we went and we now have salvaged all of those films, and they are unbelievable. If you would like to know how they interrogated criminals, sort of, in the 1950s, we can show you. It is absolutely amazing. Those materials we are conserving in a more conventional way, cold storage. Films, if you keep them in cold storage, or even if you keep them in non-very humid environments, they actually can stay fine for hundreds of years. Video is a different beast. Video, because of the difficulty in playback, we only have a limited time, which is why we're working so hard to express the urgency of local television. Because we're going to lose, I would argue, we're going to lose at least 50 years of American history from at least in moving images, right? The papers will be fine. Papers will be fine, but we're going to lose a lot of footage. And when we think about the story that we're telling about our country, to lose statewide voices is a real problem, in my opinion. It's a real problem. Because what we'll end up with is New York, Los Angeles, Washington, Boston. They are all over this. There's more television in Boston than you can imagine. But I think it's one of those things that we need to kind of say, well, we have a real plurality of voices, and we need to address this. So it's tricky, but I think, again, for those of you that have collections of your own families or organizations, just remember copies and copies and backup, or multiplicity of backup in this digital age. It's really important.
Yes, you mentioned days when we could bring things to you.
Yeah.
What's the next?
So great question. So our next film roundup will take place in October. So this is actually, I'm so glad this worked out to come in September. You are welcome to go online. We have a whole area of our website that talks about the Texas Film Roundup program. It tells you how to arrange to drop off materials starting in October. And the program does take a while because it has proven very popular. But at the end of that, again, we will return all of the original materials along with digital copies and information on how to keep that material safe and sound. So if you go onto our website, you'll see a segment of the site that's devoted to the Texas Film Roundup. Because the program has been so popular, and sadly our funding has not increased with the popularity that often happens, right? Our funding has not necessarily kept up with the success of the program. It does take a few months just because we're a small team. All women, by the way. We have a film archive, all women run, in the entire country. It is mainly a men's domain, technical roles. I argue not. That being said, that sounds really bad. And it also takes a long time. That's just two things are not connected. We're not chit-chatting. We just have a lean team. I was like, oh, they're going to kill me for saying this. And we do work with a lot of students. But it does take a little bit, so I always have to caution people. But I will say that hopefully one of my friends points here is you can always take these materials to Walmart. You can take them to Costco. They send them to China. I'll tell you that. They won't tell you that. They are sending them to China. That's why it's really cheap to do it at Walmart and Costco. What we try to say is we feel be a part of the community, that your materials can tell these different stories that really are the history of our state. I'll give you one example that I think was pretty special. In American history and in the civil rights movement, we talk a lot about Selma, right? But the footage of Selma is really a very violent story of Selma. It is with fire hoses, it's violent protests, and so kids will often say, oh, it was a terrible, horrible time, and this is what marches were like. When we were in Amarillo, got a collection from a gentleman who came in. He said, my father had a pile of 16mm films. And he said, my father actually was a agricultural equipment salesman. He traveled around the country selling tractors. He happened to be in Selma the days of the march. And he took his home movie camera, and he went out and he wandered around Selma. And the amazing part of that footage is how boring it was. It wasn't all violent. It was that he caught on camera all of these young people coming together and trying to figure out how to protest, how to do this peacefully, and kind of the boredom of how we change these rights, right? The civil rights kind of slow process. So it provides this really interesting counter-example to what the U.S. national news chose, which is very titillating, like social media, then get the endorphins going. But actually, what this footage shows is, wow, this is pretty dull waiting for Martin Luther King to start walking, right? You see a lot of these kind of New York guys just like, come on, man, like, let's go. Fascinating. Well, not fascinating, kind of boring. But if you create the context for it, it becomes more interesting. So, so my pitch is don't go to Costco. Come to us and help us tell some unique stories of Texas history. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great work you do in our community. It was a great presentation. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. And just, we'll put it out in the next e-blast and talk again in October. Film roundup. We'll send it again to all our members so that everybody knows. I'm excited. have a whole big thing of all this film my mother's first cousin took in Texas in the 50s. So I hope that
I would like to see everybody's baby film.
That was really cool.